thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your hosts, Jason Beck and Rico Lamitte, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us. Yeah, you guys, that's right. Good morning. It is Monday, June 24th, and today is National Patch Day, National Take Back the Lunch Break Day, and National Pralines Day. Everyone loves a praline. And thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. You can look up above on your screen to see exactly where we live on the internet. And we are live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and on our very own website at www.highat9news.com. But kicking it off first, that's right, it is the dope dad himself, rocking the Northwestern cap today because he's having a bad hair day. That's right. It is the dope dad himself, Mr. Rico Lamitte. You having a hazy,
Jason.
You having a hazy morning this morning, Rico? Wearing the Northwestern hat?
Your go-to.
You having a hazy morning?
Am I having a hazy morning?
Having a hazy morning?
I'm having a wonderful morning, Jason.
Oh, I see. I noticed you wore the Northwestern hat, so
great.
Figured it was a hazy morning.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see what you did. I like that.
Yes. Shout out to the hazers.
Speaking of the hazers, let's talk about this. Let's get things started off right this morning, and let's talk about the haze that's been cast over California's legal retail market. So my story today is coming from John Schroyer at the Green Market Report, and question is the California legal retail market dying, or are we witnessing a renaissance in real time? See my video up here? Like, show my face. There we go. All right.
Yeah, she's getting her transition.
According to Green Market Reports, John Schroyer, hundreds of companies have quietly disappeared from the California marketplace, as well as some that have made the headlines. Schroyer says that a list of casualties from the California cannabis world is quickly piling up, and industry insiders expect more failures in the months to come. But the real question is who and when. These are just a few of the failure examples, the big name failure examples from the last 18 months. Northern California distributor and brand Flowcana, which ceased operations in early 2023, initially making a big splash in the run-up to the 2018 market. Southern California multi-operator MedMen Enterprises began the gray market medical days in California and grew to become one of the first billion-dollar valuations after going public in 2018 before imploding earlier this year and filing for creditor protection. Magazine turned weed dealer High Times, which is now being sold off for parts after making a big bet on cannabis retail in California and then failing to repay nearly $29 million loan. Oof. One of the biggest and one of the largest cannabis distributors in California, Herbal, collapsed last spring under the weight of its own debt to vendors, leaving a huge trail of unpaid bills in its wake for business partners to swallow. Delivery company Grassdoor also closed down suddenly just before Thanksgiving last year, laying off all employees and began liquidating its assets. Who is he saying is next? According to sources, one such recent casualty is Southern California grower and brand Candescent, Some of you may remember once upon a time, they tried to revamp the entire strain name landscape by marketing its flower names reflecting their psychoactive effects, such as charge, calm, and other words beginning with C. They're done, an industry source said of Candescent after requesting anonymity to share knowledge of investor discussions. A round of applause for that one.
Yes. You got a round of applause over there? There we go. There you go, Rico. There you go.
Oh, my God. Mm-hmm. Sound like Kendrick Lamar dancing on the graves right now. Mm-hmm. Although Candescent and affiliate LMG processors technically still have 3 active business permits for manufacturing and distribution, the company surrendered or gave up on 10 other permits it once held. Company's website is inactive, and former executives could not be reached for comment on this story. There's also plenty of well-known other companies, both plant-touching and ancillary businesses, that are obviously floundering and could be poised to follow others to the grave, industry experts said. Some of those include Lowell Farms, lost almost $3 million in the first quarter of the year, and nearly $13 million the quarter before that. State House Holdings asked Canadian regulators for a cease trade order regarding its shares on the Canadian Securities Exchange and has not yet reported its fourth quarter 2023 financial results. In the third quarter of last year, however, State House lost $17 million and had almost $300 million in total liabilities. Another delivery giant, privately held Ease, is facing foreclosure after defaulting on a $37 million loan. Gold Flora lost nearly $14 million in its first quarter of the year after posting $42.7 million loss for the 2023 calendar year. Company also has nearly $250 million in total liabilities. Ancillary firm WM Technology, the parent company of Weed Maps, has regularly over the past several years been posting multi-million-dollar losses. Last year alone, Weed Maps lost $15.7 million, and its dispensary and cannabis brand customer base is steadily contracting as California market has shrunken, just as mainstream platforms like Google and Yelp have begun listing licensed cannabis shops. Glasshouse Brands, one of the largest cannabis growers in the state, one of Jason's favorites, appears solidly funded with a good runway, but has been reporting net losses for quarter after quarter, including a $18.3 million loss in the first quarter of this year and a $97.4 million loss last year. Morgan Paxia, managing director at Poseidon Management, says that the common thread tying many of these failures together is simply bad business decisions. Here's what she had to say. Governance, governance, governance. That's what's really been challenging the quality of governance and management. The industry is so big at this point, you can't just say it's the environment. That's why the good companies manage through it. Even some of the bigger players that appear to be doing well are likely barely hanging on or are focusing on diversifying, perhaps outside of California. He cited the global cannabis lifestyle brand Cookies as an example, which has heavily invested in Florida and even outside of the U.S., but hasn't appeared to have put as much back into its California operations. Cookies is really messy under the surface. It looks great on the surface because of the brand, but it's really convoluted structure of who owns that and who owns what. It's very, very disaggregated. It's hard to get a sense of corporate health. The bottom line, he says, is a lot of the big name failures were part of a bubble surrounding the industry, optimism in its nascent days, which led to major fundraising numbers, but not much in substantive business development. There were so many brands, they were everywhere. They were raising these monster valuations on nothing, and it was obviously a bubble. Candescent is a great example. You remember talking with Adrian Sedlin in the early days, and you asked him what EBITDA was, and I don't think he knew what the acronym was. He was like, we're Silicon Valley, bro. We're burning cash. Lowell Farms was like that too. All right. There's a lot of stuff. Jared Kylo has some good stuff in there too. Some good quotes in there. He says like this death spiral. We've all talked about if we don't do this right, the failures are just going to create more failures. Kylo and others also noted that the regulated market conditions in California, which have been notoriously difficult since being implemented in 2018, following a long successful gray market area that began in the late 90s, have also scared off major multi-state operators like Forefront Ventures, Trulieve, Curaleaf, Slang Worldwide, and all of them have exited California over the past 2 years. Look at the people who left. You've got the big MSOs who've left, and they did not fail, but they failed to make enough money to stay. There's even more who gave up. Even the big ones like Jerry Garcia brand. Whatever happened to that? Whatever happened to Willie Nelson's brand? I can go on the list. There's so much money here, but let me go somewhere else. That isn't to say that there are no success stories. Grant Palmer on his Santa Cruz based retail chain is a good example of what Fun Canna's Adam Stetner tried pointing to recently about a decent number of small to mid-sized companies that are not getting much press attention but are executing nonetheless. There's also a handful of bigger names that, despite the odds, also appear to be succeeding. Sources agreed. The most commonly cited example is LA-based Stizzy. The popular Jeter brand is another name that was floated. Others cited retail chains Embark and Soulful, distributors Nabis and Mammoth Distribution, and growers Fig Farms and Decibel Gardens as varying levels of California success stories. My question is this, is it so much that California retail market is failing, or are we just seeing a changing of the guard? I know a lot of my particular take on this is a lot of these bigger names that we saw that making all that noise early on, they had zero connection with the cannabis faithful, with the community, with the legacy community. And they tried to push people out. They didn't play nice. And California is all about weed for the people, is it not? If you're not doing the right things on the ground here, I'm just not going to. I'd say we're going to see more of a renaissance with small to medium-sized operators. They're going to be gobbling up a lot of the poorly operating retailers out there, and I think you're going to see them just as big, if not bigger, than these other big companies that left the state or that have gone out of business. I'm Rico Lamitte, the dopest dad on the street for High at 9 News. Happy Monday, everybody. Let's talk about it, man. What do y'all think about this this article in Green Market Report?
I say goodbye.
I mean, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. There is a lot of retailers are struggling. You know, when you look at it too from a tax perspective, you know, standalone retails are hit the hardest on 280E as far as any other part of the supply chain. Within cannabis. So, you know, the retail market is tough, not to mention you have the trap market that is alive and well and just eating everybody's lunch. So, I mean, this isn't surprising. And then like the points that you made earlier, Rico, is that a lot of those people that you mentioned had no real ties to the cannabis community or to the industry. And that a lot of those people were hoping to make all of their money off of the new customer base that was going to come into the market, because they were going to try to advertise to all these first time users, like similar to like what was the flower company that you had mentioned?
Candescent.
Yeah, Candescent. Yeah. Oh yeah, we're gonna market. Yeah, we're gonna market to the stiletto stoners, and everyone wants to buy cannabis based off of a feeling. That's crap.
I mean, that's total crap. And I wouldn't smoke Candescent. I think it's interesting, and I think that it stuck out to me. Some of the brands that were listed as having moderate to okay success, like I'm pretty known for knowing everybody's business, and they're in a lot of debt and failing and going into receiverships, and a lot of those brands are doing maybe a better job with their PR team. Shout out to your PR team for hiding what's under your skirt. But
that's actually a really good point, Jenny Beth. That is a really, really, really good point, because a lot of these companies raise money based off of the fact of the different reports and things that they put out in the media. So having that part of your business really as a strong foothold can really be the difference between you getting that next $1 million funding round and not getting it.
Right.
Definitely perception of your business is a big part of what's going to come out and how much money you're going to get.
Perception's reality, right?
Perception's reality, and perception being reality has cost a lot of investors a lot of fucking money. So I think, I would just implore everyone to lift that skirt up and make sure that you're not about to put your money into a sinking ship.
Yeah, don't put your money into a bad bush.
A bad bush.
Did you say the bush under the lifted skirt with the stiletto?
Yeah.
I don't know where we're going with this, but
Yarrow, we've been waiting for you, Yarrow, to chime in on this.
I mean, I'm more of like a Birkenstock baker than a stiletto stoner.
Okay.
But I think part of what happened is with the legalization of adult use in the largest cannabis economy in the world, there was this notion that the only thing the industry needed was some people with MBAs and good basic business fundamentals, and that what was missing from regulated cannabis was discipline, acumen, and business know-how. And some of that is not incorrect, but the hubris with which those people from outside came in to teach and educate the industry about how to behave and how to transact and how to interact. And there was some good in that. The example of the good is the falling out of favor of the grow bro culture and the fact that we all reacted negatively to naked women lying on tables, having sushi laid out over them while companies burned other people's money. And so there was this idea that like, that's not where the industry wants to go. We need to normalize, we need to level up, we need to act like adults. But then there was this idea that like, just because somebody had been in the industry for 10 plus years was because they couldn't make it in any other industry, and that these people were going to come in and show us how to behave and to do well.
You're
and a
so
lot
right
of those
about
people,
that.
They tripped on their own, you know what?
Yep.
And they came in thinking that they were going to teach instead of learn. And I think that was one of the biggest problems. The other big problem was this idea that enough of a war chest would solve any business mistakes, that it would give people an opportunity to make adjustments and to go, oops, because they had this war chest, which was going to give them more runway, more sustainability, more longevity than the lean and mean. What I really appreciated about this article, which was incredibly well written, and I've criticized this writer and I've complimented this writer, but like he named a lot of the really relevant people in California and got quotes from incredibly important people in California, Kylo, Praxia, investors, head of retail associations, and the example of Grant Palmer as lean and mean. I mean, I've known Grant for many, many years, and he's been very disciplined, very frugal, very smart, and didn't get caught up in any frothy enthusiasm. A lot of these MSOs just came in and said, we've got a big war chest.
We got all this money.
Do it better.
Yep.
And I think it's that lack of humility, that lack of learning, and this idea that they were bringing instead of trying to learn and contribute that led to a lot of the decisions that cost investors a ton of money.
Well, they were trying to be culture vultures instead of trying to acclimate with the culture, Yarrow.
And the idea that if you did enough arbitrage,
you got to.
What's that, Rico?
I feel like you got to approach this shit skeptical. I mean, that's what real business people do. You don't just like, it's like, oh yeah, we're good. You can't be like looking at everything through rose tinted shades and thinking that everything's gonna be absolutely awesome. All of your ideas are gonna come into fruition. You are a fish out of water.
And shout out,
you're approaching the cannabis industry. This shit's been going on forever without you, and you thinking that you're going to change all the rules with no friends whatsoever. Like, good luck.
No new friends.
Well, then you're in California where you guys actually know what quality cannabis looks like and smells like and smokes like. So you can't just put money at it and think that you're going to produce a quality flower. Like, money doesn't produce quality flowers. You have to have people that know what they're doing to actually produce great medicine.
Yeah.
Let me give you a great example. When Cresco did their launch party in California, they didn't have any of their flower at their launch party.
Well, that's because no one wanted their flower.
No, it's because their launch party was a hard date, and their grow and the ability to bring that California biomass to their launch party was probably a bit more flexible and or had delays in production based on construction or what have you. But if you were in adult bev, you would never have a launch party for a beverage without the beverage. Like, it just wouldn't happen in adult bev.
Well, yeah. I mean, in all fairness, Yarrow, just to push back on that a little bit, I mean, no one wanted Cresco flour in the first place. The Cresco brand sunk like a sailing ship, and no one ever wanted to order it because no cannabis retailers wanted to be promoting MSOs on their shelves. But
well, they acquired some grows in Santa Rosa, California, and they were smart enough to see quality and pay for quality and acquire quality. And to your point, Jason, nobody wanted Cresco flour.
No one wanted Cresco on their shelf.
what would their launch party have looked like if they came in just bam, bam, buttoned up and swaggy, and everything looked amazing, and the flower was off the charts, and everybody was like, "Holy shit!" Like there was an opportunity for them to impress.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that they ever had an opportunity to impress the community at all. I'm not buying that one. They may have had an opportunity to woo the community, but not to impress the community.
You know, the one good thing about all these MSOs coming in and dumping all this money into sourcing from other farms and things like that, before they lost their ass, is they definitely paid us out a bunch of money. So thanks for infusing companies that should be here with the money that you couldn't manage properly. You know, silver linings.
Fair enough. But shout out to the Suitor
I'd like to address the.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. No, please go ahead, Mathieu St. Germain.
Well, I'd just like to address the elephant in the room, and I'm sure that this is going to piss some people off.
Yeah.
I will say, before I start, there are a couple of exceptions. The biggest problem in the California cannabis industry has been the stores. Mm-hmm. It's the 215 model open to people without actual ball sack could get into the game because their uncle had a storefront and they had enough money to rip people off. Stores have been the problem. Mm-hmm. Stores have consistently underpaid people using, the Harborside or the Armenian pawn shop model. The stores have underpaid growers and ripped growers off. You as a grower would come in, and not me, man. I didn't deal with any of these stores in the 215 model because they're all bullshit. But my friends, I heard the story a million times. They go in, the store will talk you down about how your weed's crap. They'll give you their, shuck and jive about how they got to pay you. Like in a month, they'll take your weed. And when you come back to get paid, then it's an excuse about how they got rated or whatever. And yes, sometimes they would get rated. Wouldn't have paperwork on the rates because the cops would just take their TVs and whatever product and money was there. But then the shops started to use this as an excuse to basically rip off growers. That model continued throughout the 215 until the legalization era. And then during the legalization, the 64 era, many of the stores kept doing it. And what they would do is just take everybody's money, not pay the distros, not pay the brands, and then move the license to another business or, dissolve the company, even though the store would stay there. And then further proof of them enacting this model, the funniest part was when they moved the excise tax from distros to retail.
Just recently,
all these retails started to do the same thing to the state of California that they've been doing to growers for decades. The only difference is that California came in and continues to come in with armed agents and just scoop all of the money out of these retail stores. And so I maintain that the retail model has been the problem in California since the outset. Those who have stayed away from the retail model and have continued to craft excellent cannabis have continued to thrive throughout this entire period. And I agree with Yarrow and Jenny and the rest of you about the MSO guys. I had a million meetings with guys with a big watch, told me about how they were an entrepreneur because their dad or their uncle gave them $5 million and they were going to come in and show us idiots how it was done. And so it actually turns out that in order to craft and present great cannabis and not get killed or arrested, have to be a pretty swift, smart, and intelligent mover. And most of us in the cannabis industry, there are, again, some exceptions, didn't come in with dad's money or family money or uncle's money. We had to do this ourselves. And what you end up getting is a scrappier, harder working, more intelligent operator. And those are the people that we're actually seeing continue to thrive, both on the smaller side on retail as well as on the trap side. Let's read that comment from Suitor Music, Jay.
Yeah, let me go into because speaking of that is a perfect transition to this comment from the Suitor of Music, who says, "Smoke small batch indoor living soil, so you can flex and say I smoke the best like Jason Beck." Yeah, shout out to the Suitor. Yeah, shout out to the Suitor. That's right. And all I have to say on that is, you run your stores lean and mean and be about weed for the people, and you should be all right. And after that, we're going to go to
pay your suppliers on time.
And pay.
Oh man, that was weird. Hey, you America. Do I look like Sean Connery? Good morning, America. Saman Razani coming to you live from sunny Los Angeles, California with the one and only highest host, Mr. Jason Beck, smoking on the best weed in the world. Did you know that we have an audio-only version of our podcast? You can find it on Apple, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. No excuses in 2024. If you haven't checked us out, check it out now. And also, check out what the Prophet's doing in 2024.
And we are back.
He's the cannabis industry's most balanced man.
Fair.
He smokes the best weed in the world while making some of the worst takes. He's the highest Republican in every room, but from what we all know, that's a pretty low bar. So here to bring us a little Monday headline homeostasis, it's the High at 9 head honcho himself, Jason Beck.
Oh, yeah. Good morning, Rico. Oh, man, I got a story for you, bro. That's right. Put your helmets on because Jets Tay Hayes is arrested in Alabama on marijuana possession charge, you guys. That's right. New York Jets cornerback Tay Hayes was arrested in Alabama early Sunday morning on marijuana possession charge, officials said. Hayes was booked into the Morgan County Jail and was released on $300 bond just after 5 a.m. local time. He was charged with second-degree marijuana possession, according to AL.com. And in a quote, "We are aware of the situation and we will refrain from further comment as it is pending a legal matter," the Jets said in a statement to the New York Post. Hayes was a standout defensive back at Appalachian State after playing high school football for Decatur in Alabama. He went and was funded back in 2019. It just rewinded. It's going too fast. It's going too fast. I'm just going to my thing. Hayes was a standout defensive back at Appalachian State after playing high school football for Decatur in Alabama, and he went undrafted in 2019 and started his NFL career with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He has bounced around on several rosters since then, and Hayes has been with the Miami Dolphins, Minnesota Vikings, Arizona Cardinals, Carolina Panthers, New England Patriots, Detroit Lions, and Baltimore Ravens before signing with the Jets during the 2023 season. He sounds like he's one of these NFL groupies, all these NFL teams. He has appeared in 14 total NFL games, and he had 18 total tackles and 1 fumble recovery in that span. And Hayes also spent time with the Birmingham Stallions, now of the United Football League. He was on the Stallions in 2022 USFL Championship team. He signed a reserve future contract with the Jets back in January and was expected to vie for a roster spot. And New York was 3rd in yards and allowed and 12th in points allowed in 2023, and that team finished 7 of 10 for the second consecutive season. 7 out of 10. That's a losing season, but nonetheless, I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about this. More NFL players getting caught with weed, and this is Jason Beck for the High at 9 News Hour. What do y'all have to say about this?
First of all, fuck App State. They were our rival. But, I think it's interesting, and I think a lot of the movement that's shown with these career guys, sometimes those are the players that are causing problems in the locker room, that are causing problems and having
those are the ones doing the hazing?
Disciplinary problems. I mean, half of our basketball team got put on suspension for cannabis. So I think, once again, my opinion with NFL players and cannabis is it's a neuroprotectant. These guys are getting banged around and beat up for your entertainment every Sunday, so let them have the weed, please.
Let them smoke.
Yes. Former athlete, rugby player, cannabis definitely helps you recover, react much better. And this guy isn't even on the team. Like, this guy is on a reserve future contract. He's not even on the team yet. It's big time news. We're talking about it right here. And this guy literally isn't even on the roster.
Well, I mean, but look, he just hops around from team to team, like, you know what I'm saying? Like groupies in a nightclub.
Well, he's with the UFL. He's just trying to find a spot. He's just trying to find his claim. He was at Appalachian State.
Crap
and then
state.
UFL, like, he's just trying to find a way anyway.
Maybe he should run faster in the 40 and he'd find a team.
Exactly.
Well, maybe.
Sounds like he's an underperformer to me.
Wow. Let's not attack the man. I mean, honestly, free my dude, but $300 bond, that's probably the most.
Yeah, $300, that's cheap AF
That's
right
cheap.
there.
I mean, is that you think he used a bondsman, that's the 10% of 3,000?
No, I don't.
No?
I don't. No.
Nope.
No, I'm not buying that.
So then it was a shakedown in Alabama.
Maybe.
Alabama shaking
Maybe he got
black
caught
people
with
down
shake.
there?
Maybe he got caught with shake.
Oh.
And that's
Down
why it's
in
only
Alabama.
$300 bond.
Oh, my.
Just saying.
Maybe.
Just
All right.
saying. You know, if you bond out of jail, let's just say it was $3,000. He could have just paid that whole $3,000 and he would get his whole $3,000 back. I think most people don't understand that if they pay their full bond, that they will get all that money back as long as they go through the court process. That's all that money is to do withhold. And bondsmen's and actually do put up that full amount, and they collect that full amount. So that's what they get paid. So when you pay that, you have a $10,000 bond and you pay $1,000, that bondsman is making $9,000 off you after you complete your court.
It's not.
No, they're
it's
getting
not
their
that most
9,000
people
back.
don't understand. It's that most people don't have the money. It's a difference of outcome based on resources, which is how the justice system is not blind.
Well, I think most people don't understand that.
Most people don't understand a lot of things, but I do understand that there are plenty of NFL players who are actively playing and were actively playing and killed people. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the guy's simple possession probably should be swept under the rug.
Sweep it under the rug like a bunch of
career.
crumbs. What do you think, Rico? You used to play football.
They're aware. They didn't think they're even doing anything. We're aware.
Rico had to turn into a pumpkin, Jay.
Oh, did Rico turn into a pumpkin? Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough. Look at that.
He's perfected the Irish goodbye during these midway jump offs.
That's good. I mean, he needs to. He's gonna go and work and get out that happy.
I feel like
cabbage
there
on.
should be a special music that at least plays in the background to let our viewers know that Rico has to jump.
Oh, that's a whole production thing, bro. You're trying to add a whole bunch of costs onto.
Well, good sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Cute, Yarrow. You have any final thoughts on this, Mathieu St. Germain, before we move on?
Try to be real careful in Alabama with weed. We all know how they are there. Other than that, man, let everybody go. Let everybody smoke weed. That's the plan.
And shout out to everyone that attended in Alabama over the weekend, the Kid Rock concert. My buddy Matt Gates was there and he got on stage and performed, and man, looked like a good time. But nonetheless, you guys, we're going to roll
Did Gates go to Alabama because the age of consent is 16, Jay?
Stop it. Stop. I knew you were going to go with something like that, Mathieu St. Germain. Oh, yes. We're gonna roll right on into the Count himself, the immortal one who has walked the earth for thousands upon thousands of years and won't tell anyone his age, but nonetheless, we all can see it right when we look at him. That's right, it is the Count himself, Mr. Mathieu St. Germain.
Definitely getting up there, man. Need glasses to read.
Let's see what I'm saying.
Got another sweet. This one's just right down my alley, right down my pipe, bro. Older people who use psychedelics show fascinating brain function. Drugs with psychedelic effects like psilocybin, LSD, MDMA, and cannabis help protect the brain from aging. A recent survey of over 3,000 U.S. adults between 42 and 92 has found that those who reported using a psychedelic of any kind in the past year show fewer depressive symptoms, favorable changes to their higher order brain function. Compared to those who do not use psychedelics, those who did scored higher on tests conducted over the phone, which assessed inductive reasoning, verbal fluency, working memory, processing speed, attention switching, inhibitory control, and resisting the pleas from Nigerian princes for large amounts of money to regain their fortune. Psychedelic users did not, however, score better on episodic memory, which stores and retrieves everyday events and is often impacted by dementia. Findings are only observational, so they can't determine cause and effect. They rely on subjective accounts with uncontrolled drug doses. What's more, the study does not distinguish different types of psychedelics being taken. Nevertheless, gerontologists, that means old people doctors, Al Kumar Bhattacharya from Utah State and Khalil Fern from the University of South Florida, there's reason to keep exploring. Psychedelics have recently garnered increased scientific interest the world over after several clinical trials found these drugs have the therapeutic potential to treat neuropsychiatric disorders such as anxiety, depression, or PTSD. A growing number of clinical trials exploring the potential health benefits of these illicit and historically stigmatized drugs, these studies rarely include older patients. In fact, the possibility that psychedelics could be used as a tool to restore processes in the aging brain has hardly been explored at all. That's a significant oversight, argued Bhattacharya and Fern, as older adulthood is often associated with declines in executive function and mood disorders. A number of recent studies on older cohorts suggest that psychedelics can enhance creativity and improve executive brain function, even at very small doses. Federal and state governments should decriminalize psychedelics so that research can be conducted in a manner that ensures reliability and validity. Longitudinal research, including clinical and community samples, is essential to utilizing psychedelics as an alternative therapy in late-in-life cognitive functions. Other scientists agree that we should start to consider psychedelic-assisted therapies for older adults. Rigorous long-term trials will be needed to test the safety and efficacy of this approach before it could ever become an established clinical tool, of course. Now, what I'd like to say real quick is Paul Stamets has proven recently with a study called the TAP test that not just psychedelics, but lion's mane, which contains erinacea and erinacine A, have been shown to improve motor function. And so what they've been doing is giving people microdoses of psilocybin and lion's mane, doing a tap test. I think we may have spoken about this before, where they time how many times these folks can tap within a given time period. After being on these Stamets stack microdoses for a week or more, their tap test improves by, I think, plus 30% or more, how many times they can tap within a given amount of time, which is basically showing an upregulation of neurological function through the application of both lion's mane and psilocybin-containing mushrooms. So this looks like some really amazing news, and anything we can do to keep older folks like myself pretty soon here spry and mentally sharp, there we go, is welcome. And I think every time we apply science to these medicines so far, what we're seeing is they are a boon for humanity. And we just have to keep working to overcome the stigma that was caused by Richard Nixon, J. Edgar Hoover, Ronald Reagan, and these anti-drug pro-fascism advocates. I'm really looking forward to what you guys have to say and to starting this Monday off powerfully. This is Mathieu St. at 9 News. Come on in, everybody.
Matthew, so now is this only because doing psychedelics opens up these different neurological pathways, and basically these senior citizens were so-called maybe closed-minded and now are opening up new pathways in their neurological system? Is that why this study is coming out?
Well, number one, I'm going to ask in advance for forgiveness from both Dr. Jean and Dr. Mark, because I'm not actually a scientist. I'm just a citizen science lover. But there's a few things.
Bro science.
Yeah, number one, they help with depatterning and repatterning. And what happens is as you think and have emotions and develop routines, you actually make grooves. You make pathways
new channels
in your brain, almost like grooves in a record. And so one of the things these things are doing is allowing you to think outside this box and these patterns and forge greater brain connectivity. Another thing they did, if we look back about 4 months to a story I shared, is the classical psychedelics actually penetrate into the nucleus of brain cells, interact with the 5-HT2A receptor inside the nucleus, and cause both neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. Neurogenesis is the growing of new neurons. Neuroplasticity is greater connection of neurons through growing new dendrites, which are like antennas. And so what's happening, it seems, is that depatterning effect, along with the reaching out to grow new patterns, is allowing people to open their brains and reach for more information, more experiences. And one of the things we see with neuroplasticity and brain function is the more you expose your brain to new input, the more your brain will continue to grow, the less brain volume you will lose, and the more likely you are to remain dementia and Alzheimer's free into old age. The thing is diet, right? There's all types of things in artificial, in our modern day artificial diet that cause plaques in the brain that contribute to ALS. And so keeping a good diet, keeping yourself engaged in games and nature, and doing hella psychedelics is a way to stay healthy, strong, and intelligent in old age.
So you're basically saying is that you can teach an old dog new tricks, Mathieu St. Germain.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll put my stamp on it.
Look at what was happening in this article. I mean, the oldest person they studied was 92 years old, and it says in the article the study was only for people who had done psychedelics within the last year. So, like, shout out to that 92-year-old that's getting jiggy in the old person's home. Like, that's who I want to kick it with. Like, I want to hear that person's stories. They are keeping it dendrite positive.
Well,
like that person is.
Hold on, you have to assume that they can remember those stories too, though.
Yeah, who's getting plugged to the nursing home that's getting them all mushrooms?
That's right. That's right. I even if their stories aren't real, I'll sit around the campfire with a 92-year-old and hear him spin some tall tales from an era I can't confirm did or did not occur.
Oh, I totally
just think that's so cool.
Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah, just break out the marshmallows and make some s'mores with the old senior citizens. I'm with it.
I sent this article to my mom along with the TED Talk of Paul Stamets on the TAP test, and she's a yes, so I'm going to get her the Stamets Stack microdoses. She's starting this week.
Amazing.
Interesting. I'm going to send this over to my mom too. She was a registered nurse for a number of years. She's been retired for a long time, and I think she will find this extremely interesting. Fair enough. Any thoughts on this, Brandon, before we move on?
No, that's what all I was going to say is, I think that, like we said, just finding a way to teach old dog new tricks. We're learning that psilocybin and all sorts of things are helping our brain. Why aren't we giving access?
Fair enough. And on that, we're going to roll into a commercial, and we're going to be right back. The Control Tower from Highly Educated has perfected the dab. Utilizing the concept of thin film evaporation, you can waste none of it and taste all of it. The micro texture of the SE pillar increases nucleation at elevated temperatures. And with the tower propelling at 2,600 RPMs, it's certainly the most efficient dab experience to date. The Control Tower from Highly Educated. All right, stop whatever you're doing. Make sure that you hit that like button. I know we'll appreciate it, you will appreciate it, and YouTube will appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you've not subscribed already. And all of the articles that we cover on today's show, you can read directly on our website right now at www.high9news.com. I'm Jason Beck, and this is Smoky Vanilla. And if you want to feel as good as I look, then you need to get a stretch and smoke with Smoky Vanilla.
Hi, I'm Smoky Vanilla. I have my bachelor's degree in kinesiology, and I'm a sports massage therapist and stretch coach. I focus mostly on individuals that are in sport with chronic pain or injury. I love to intuitively create and customize a session based on the individual that I'm working with. We'll go over a few postural assessments, work together to create a wellness journey based on the health history, past injuries, or anything still affecting you today. And we'll get you back on your feet right away with less pain.
We're about to stretch, and then we're gonna smoke, because we're gonna get on our stretch and smoke. If you want to feel as good as I look, then you need to come on down and get a stretch and smoke with none other than Smoky Vanilla. Yes, and coming up next, that's right, it is Miss Jenny Beth Dills. She is the founder of Kind Cannabis Consulting Agency and has a slick ass tongue, just like those those butterfly knives in the '80s Michael Jackson videos. That's right, it is none other than Miss Jenny Beth Dills.
A slick ass tongue. Huh?
Slick ass. That's right.
Well, all right. Well, you know who else is slick? The DEA. And that's where this story's coming from once the fuck again. So former DEA leaders and GOP AGs demand a public hearing on cannabis rescheduling. Just a day before the deadline for public comments to be submitted passed last Thursday, 18 state attorney generals and 9 former DEA administrators penned a letter to the agency calling on them to host administrative hearings on the landmark legislation. The dual letters both argue that the Department of Justice, DOJ's, plan to move cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 substance would represent that most significant relaxation of narcotic restrictions in the history of the Controlled Substances Act. Oh. As such, a public hearing on the proposals was in the public's interest, and therefore in the interest of the United States. As DEA made clear in the proposed rule, additional data and rigorous scientific analysis is needed to determine whether marijuana is appropriately placed into Schedule 3, the former DEA official said. Sifting through the competing claims about marijuana's pharmacological effects, potential for abuse, and implications for public safety are best done at a hearing. Should public hearings be called? It is expected that the timeline for pushing rescheduling through could be delayed until after the presidential election in November. Oh, imagine they got more work to do. Since opening the doors to public comments on rescheduling in May, some 22,000 comments have been submitted. While the policy's critics, such as the campaign group Smart Approaches to Marijuana, SAM, have argued that the 60-day window is insufficient and should be extended by another 30 days to gather comprehensive feedback, others have come out in support of the proposed changes. Truck drivers have called on the DEA to support rescheduling despite concerns from their employers about safety risk. While a few of the over 20,000 comments on the DEA's rulemaking process come from truck drivers, those that do are overwhelmingly in favor of the change, Benzinger reported. Drivers argue that cannabis should be treated similarly to alcohol, citing its lower risks in accidents. The American Truckers Association, however, raised safety concerns and suggests that reclassification would still require strict regulations to prevent impaired driving. All right, well, listen, my mommy is a truck driver. Shout out to my biological mommy. Very cool decision after all her kids moved out of the house, and she said, I've never been anywhere. Fuck it, I'm gonna drive a truck. And I know that they're not allowed to have alcohol in their trucks, even when they're stopping, even when they're, on a 24, 48-hour break, right? So I think that it's really interesting that the truck drivers, that's a lot of comments from truck drivers. But I will tell you, she's also had some health issues, and I wanted to give her some CBD products, hemp-derived products, and she was terrified to take them or even, try to have them in her truck. I gave her a hemp-based hair product, and she wouldn't put that in the truck because she's like, I'll lose my job. So I think, it'd be kind of cool to see.
Especially if she has to give a hair follicle sample.
Yeah, that'd be shitty.
Mm-hmm. Man, I mean, truck drivers are really the backbone of our country in the sense that that's how we get all of our goods. Like, none of you guys could order all this crap from Amazon if there weren't truck drivers involved in this whole supply chain. So we want to definitely give a shout out to all of the truck drivers, and I'm glad that the trucker drivers are really getting involved in this because there's so many people that could be truck drivers, but because of these draconian drug laws are marked ineligible from being able to get a DOT license. You there, Yarrow?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure.
I think we need to still come up with some sort of fair test for cannabis. It's ridiculous. It's the same thing for heavy equipment operators. Like if you're a heavy equipment operator, you can smoke speed and do coke and drink all you want because at the end of the weekend none of that's going to show up in your pee. But you can't smoke a couple joints of bong hits because if you have any issue, you lose your license, you lose your job, you lose your health care, or et cetera.
They need to be, what?
I think there's no interest in the government or powers that be making a more fair, equitable cannabis drug test because it's way better to anyone who might be using cannabis and therefore be considered, abnormal, atypical, or somewhat revolutionary.
What I thought was interesting was that Sam was complaining about the 60-day window for comments and suggesting that be a 90-day window. And what I thought was interesting about that, and it reminded me of Trump complaining about the outcomes of elections before they were actually had, if you complain about the outcome of the election before you have the election, then you can complain about the results afterwards and say that you foresaw that there was going to be something wrong in the process. And so Sam is complaining about the 60-day window and saying it should be 90 days windows so that at the end of 60 days, if it's not extended to 90 days, they can complain about the outcomes and say that they didn't have time. But the fact that they're an organization solely dedicated to running interference on the normalization and legalization of cannabis for adult use means that of all the organizations in the world, they are the most prepared for this comment period. And so I thought that was an interesting public position for them to take.
I think that it's interesting that they're noting that it's not going to be completed until after November. Jason, there's more work to do.
I'm also curious as how do they know by the public comments that a majority of these people that have commented are truck drivers? How do they know that?
I think you're probably going to have to put in, maybe they are self-volunteering that's their. Let's look it up. Let's look up.
I don't understand how they're just grouping a majority of the comments to truck drivers. I don't understand how that's happening.
I don't know, but also let's acknowledge that truck drivers maybe don't want to be high when they're driving, but you have to understand these over-the-road truck drivers, their cabin is their home.
It's called the highway.
Yeah.
Can you hold on?
It's called the highway in the first place. I'm just saying.
Interrupting for a very valid point. I love
that. That is a very valid point. It's called the highway.
Or the freeway. So should it be free as well? Anyhow.
Well, I mean, a lot of weed is free.
All right. Jesus Christ. Their trucks are their homes, right? So you're not going to tell me what I can and can't have at my house. I mean, unless it's something crazy, right? So if other people are allowed to have it in their homes, then you should be able to at least keep it in your home. Maybe they need to talk about when you can and can't use it and whatever. And obviously, if you're driving a giant freaking 6-ton bomb down the street, you shouldn't probably be high while doing so. But you should be able to smoke it when you're done with your 85-hour trip.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Their bodies go through so much sitting in that same position, awkward. They've got to have lots of just, muscular issues that they're going through. This is something that could actually truly help them. And then we're talking about legal issues. Yeah, I had a friend that got tested after getting hurt on the job. Something fell on his head, but he came back positive for having cannabis in his system. And then they wouldn't give him his benefits because he was technically high when something fell on his head and he had smoked after his shift. But it's in his system. So now he doesn't get paid the benefits because of now the insurance won't cover it.
Mm-hmm.
Was the object that fell on his head also high? Because I could see that becoming a problem. But I mean, I don't think.
By high, do you mean it was like elevated above his head prior to falling?
No, I meant, was it stoned?
Got it.
Yep.
Okay. Just for clarity purposes. You know what I mean?
It was elevated.
Any thoughts on this, Mathieu St. Germain, before we move on?
No, sir.
Okay. All right.
I love you all.
All right. Fair enough. We're going to roll into our final commercial, and we're going to be right back. Get ready for the 2X Monster Truck Live Tour, coming to San Bernardino Nos Orange Event Show Speedway on June 22nd, and in Northern California at Watsonville at the Ocean Speedway on June 29th. Make sure you head over to www.number2extremeracingseries.com for all of the tickets for this family fun event. Feel the sparks coming on the bottom right now? Where the brand is?
And crickets.
All right, and we're back. Coming up next, that's right, he is Mr. Brandon Jones. He's out there in the great state of Missouri, and he's the founder of Be Green Distribution, one of the biggest distributors throughout the state. That's right, it is none other than Mr. Brandon Jones.
Thank you very much, Jason Beck. And I got a great story today that's coming out of here about, how they're actually giving cannabis license to people that have been incarcerated before. So I just wanted to give a shout out real quick to my brand on my t-shirt, 40 Tons, Corvain Cooper and Anthony Algretti. They do hiring fairs for those that were incarcerated for cannabis fairs all over the country, and just wanted to give them a shout out before I got into the story. But today, they got busted for weed. Now Delaware might license them to grow or sell it legally. More than 1/3 of Delaware's licenses will go to people who have marijuana convictions or grew up in disproportionately impacted areas. So Quasdo Watson and Matthew Rawl have been busted for cannabis in the past, but now they're looking to start growing and selling weed legally. Longshoreman Anthony Fairley also is mulling whether to get into cannabis businesses. Fairley has a clean record, but lives in a section of Wilmington where weed arrests have been rampant. All three could be eligible to get social equity licenses that will be issued later this year as Delaware begins launching its legal cannabis industry. Personal use quantities of cannabis have been legal for people 21 and older since April 2023, and since the state officials have been working to create a regulated cultivation, manufacturing, testing, and retail market. Of the 125 licenses, the year-old Office of Cannabis Commissioner can issue 47 are reserved for qualified social equity applicants. The cost to apply for a social equity license is $1,000 compared to the $5,000 for an open license. Those who do get a social equity license also will pay less in annual fees. To qualify, aspiring cannabis entrepreneurs must have at least 51% ownership in the proposed business and meet the criteria of one of the following. They've either lived at least 5 years in 5 of the last 10 years in what the state calls a disproportionately impacted area. In essence, that's a defined census area where cannabis arrests have been high in the last decade. Last week, the state released a map that allows people to type in their address to find out if they live in such area, and that link is here in the article. So if you are there, you can check. If you've been convicted of cannabis-related offense, as long as it wasn't for selling more than 11 pounds or dealing to a minor. So make sure you're under 11 pounds. I don't know how they came up with that arbitrary number. Or in the last criteria is you've had a parent or has a parent, legal guardian, child, spouse, or dependent who has been convicted of a cannabis crime. So with the state gearing up to start accepting applications September 1st, officials have been holding workshops to educate prospective social equity licenses on the ins and outs of the cannabis industry. The forum includes presentations on banking, tax, real estate, insurance, and legal issues involved in running a cannabis business, which is heavily regulated and takes hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital just to get started. We think it's all a lot more than that. We want to spread the information and give resources to the social equity applicants. Don't waste money and don't get taken advantage of. Quote from Deputy Cannabis Commissioner Paul Hyland told Y News during a forum this month at the Delaware Technical Community College Wilmington's campus. So we're trying to empower everybody with the knowledge and the tools. So basically, I just got, do we all agree that they should be doing this and this is the right way? Or is that the criteria they should be looking for? And it's kind of, another way to try to get social equity and those that were incarcerated back into the industry instead of giving it to, like we talked about earlier, the people that just got money from their uncle or their dad. So want to hear what you guys think about this report, guys. What do you guys?
I mean, I think until they start protecting the people who they give these licenses to, it's all for naught, right? Like if I have to have a conviction, if I have to be from a certain socioeconomic background or whatever I have to be, right? It doesn't matter if some, MSO, white guy, whatever, love you white guys, come in and completely take over my operations. We have these regulations that require 51% ownership and day-to-day control and all these things. And we see time and time again that doesn't happen. I spend a lot of time in my practice getting people out of these shitty contracts. So until the regulatory bodies are actually willing to regulate these rules that they put in place, I think that social equity programs are going to continue to be a joke.
Well, I mean, social equity programs are going to continue to be a joke exactly for those reasons, because those predatory investors just keep going around. And, you may have one contract that you submit to the state, but you have a whole other contract that you operate under. And at the same time, like, how is a court going to rule if you guys ever go to court and which contract's good? That's going to create a whole nother situation of legal battles that I'm sure we're going to see going forward. Maybe
we'll do a Sunday about that, because I've been in one of those litigations for the past year, so we can talk about it when it's all said and done with. And
interesting.
Yeah, it's fucking interesting. Mm-hmm. That's a good word for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, look, here's the thing, right? There's a couple things that go on. First of all, having two contracts, Jason, one that you submit to the state and one that you have is fraud. Anybody who engages.
So then hold on. So hold on. So if that does happen, would that mean that the social equity applicant would then default and own the company outright, since it was done in a fraudulent manner?
Not necessarily.
Not if they voluntarily participated in fraud.
Okay, I'm just asking.
And I will go a step further, because I see a lot. So. Look, I agree that a lot of people got hoodwinked into deals that were not balanced and where there was unfair advantage. And at the risk of pissing everybody off on a Monday morning, I see an equal number of people who didn't read the contract and then want to play the victim. And so that lazy bullshit mentality, I'm not sorry for anybody who doesn't read the contract and highlight the parts they don't understand, and then find somebody who has more experience or is smarter than them and say, help me understand the parts I don't understand, because this is some Shakespearean language with some wherefore art thous, and I don't understand what it means. And so I've seen this. I was on Reg Watch, that chat room on Facebook, 3 weeks ago, and this guy's like, oh, I'm in a bad deal. And I'm like, okay, well, did you not read what you signed? Right. Or did you not like it after the fact? Because at the end of the day, part of what needs to happen in certain communities is uplifting and empowerment, and nobody gets that by lazying their way into business relationships without putting in the work. You don't get intergenerational wealth without elbow grease. And so there are too many people who say they got hoodwinked into bad deals that actually need to take some personal ownership for the way in which they chose to get into business. And a lot of it boils down to laziness. And it's not just that people are under-resourced. It's that they didn't want to put in the work. They wanted a giveaway instead of an opportunity to do something. And so these programs are failed. They're flawed. They're fundamentally not good enough. And we still need to fail forward and make these programs better and make the appropriate policy adjustments. Just because some of them doesn't work doesn't mean we abandon the notion that disproportionately impacted communities from prohibition shouldn't have a leg up and an advantage when adult use markets come online in certain states and municipalities. What we have to do is do better at it. And certainly tax breaks, certainly grant funding, certainly business development and access to certain services has to be a part of that. And we need to just do better at that. But the idea that because it didn't work, we shouldn't do it, that I just can't buy into that at all. But I will also say that if somebody comes and says, oh, I got taken advantage of, and you ask them point blank if they read their contract and the answer is no, all I got to say is get the fuck out of here with that.
Absolutely. I think, there's also the sense that like a lot of these people are impoverished and they haven't seen $100,000. So you come to me and you're like, hey, here's $100,000 cash, and they're jumping at it without doing their due diligence. I completely agree. And I think we talked about earlier how, you may know how to run a cannabis company. You may know how to grow some fire weed, but you're lacking in that business acumen. So what needs to be provided by these regulatory bodies is actual education. Now, you've seen some people I did it for DCR in LA. I mean, there are certain places that are providing that education, but we also need to look at the quality of education that's provided, because there are a lot of people that are educating and purporting themselves to be experts in those programs, and they got it because they're friends with the mayor, or friends with whatever, county commissioner is putting this program together. So we need to make sure that we're having people educate that actually know what the hell they're doing, that have operated, that are currently operating, because if you operated 15 years ago, don't tell me dick all about what's happening in 2024.
Truth on that. And at the end of the day, if someone wants to give me $100,000, my job is to figure out how to say yes.
Right.
I'm not mad at that. You any thoughts on this, Mathieu St. Germain?
I think it's kind of ridiculous for us to ask cannabis to reset, the social and economic wrongs that have been perpetuated by the landed class on most human beings for the last few thousand years. Although, I definitely think that people should be given equity, and there should be a clearer and better way for this equity to happen. I think more granting the license and having an incubation program that's sponsored by the city or state would be better than having, these predatory business interests come in and carve up the contract like Yarrow and you're speaking to. Really, it comes down to the thing I'm saying all the time, which is we're still under this couple thousand years of hoodwinking and hijinks, and we need to really just take a look around and say, wait a minute. All of these folks that are the distinguished members of society and the upstanding members of society got that way through theft, robbery, rape, slavery. Until we really address that, there's going to be no way to really put Humpty Dumpty back together again and arrive at anything fair and equitable in this country, or in fact in the world. Mm-hmm. We can keep bullshitting around it and come on up with all these stopgap measures like giving people health care or trying to end the war, but it really goes back to like stop and think, take a look at dialectical history, and see clearly that there are certain families and cabals that have been ruling this planet for at least the last 10,000 years. They might have changed their name and they might have changed their country of residence. They have been the same factions and they continue to prey on us. They're like leeches or vampires. Unfortunately, violent revolution never works because it creates a new oligarchy and a new vampiric class. And what we really need is a gentle relaxation and bringing everyone to the table and having a discussion about how we can move forward in peace into the future and begin making plans for shit like escaping the earth before the sun melts it to nothing.
Look at that. You're trying to go
Monday.
Yeah, that part, Jason.
Yeah, I have nothing else to say after all of that. Yeah. Other than the fact that we're going to roll right into our final correspondent
St.
of the day.
G with the epic recap.
That's right. It's Mr. Yarrow Kubrin, who does real estate, cannabis. When there's money in cannabis, he may do some cannabis real estate. And he loves to sip a glass of Pinot with his pinky up while he's doing the contracts. That's right. It's none other than Mr. Yarrow Kubrin.
Oh, my. Well, let me say, first of all, good morning, High at 9 viewers, Monday morning, June 24th. Thank you for bearing with me as we go a little bit over time. This article is a little wordy. I'm not as cool as Jason or Rico, so I didn't put it into Chat GPT to narrow it and condense it. So I'll just read as fast as my New York roots allow. But I will say this as a preamble, which is that I picked this article because we have covered similar articles about the Chinese influence in unregulated grows, and we had covered it in other states and markets. And so when I saw this article this morning, it was published over the weekend, I chose to pick this one because it was covered by NPR. And this seems like the most credible article so far about this topic, and it started to shift my perception around this. So I thought I'd share this with you viewers and other pundits. And without further ado, drum roll, Yarrow Kubrin, Monday morning, inside the Chinese-funded and staffed marijuana farms bringing up across the United States. This was by Emily Fang, so just published this morning, and this is from NPR. Last summer, New Mexico state special agents inspecting a farm found thousands more cannabis plants than state law allows. Then on subsequent visits, they made another unexpected discovery. Dozens of underfed, shell-shocked Chinese workers. The workers said they had been trafficked to the farm in Torrance County, New Mexico, and were prevented from leaving and never got paid. They looked weathered, said Lynn Sanchez, director of the New Mexico Social Services nonprofit, who was called in after the raid. They were very scared, very freaked out. They're part of a new pipeline of migrants leaving China and making unauthorized border crossings into the United States via Mexico, and many are taking jobs at hundreds of cannabis farms bringing up across the United States. An NPR investigation into the cluster farms, which the industry calls cannabis grow operations in New Mexico, found the businesses that employ and are managed are funded largely by Chinese people. They're seeking opportunities in a flourishing U.S. cannabis market after the coronavirus pandemic led to a global economic crisis. But some of the businesses have run afoul of the law, even as states such as New Mexico have legalized marijuana. Getting out of China. One of the workers encountered at the farm in Torrance County is a 41-year-old, L, who came from China's central Hubei province a year ago. He asked NPR to use only his first initial because he is anxious about legal prosecution in the U.S. and China. L told NPR he struggled to find work in China during the pandemic lockdown. He was forced to move out of his home after a state developer demolished his home to make way for a new project. But his new apartment was never built, and he lost his deposit. When L went into the developer's office to protest, he got into a physical fight with employees of the company and was jailed. That was when a disillusioned L saw videos on Douyin, a sister app of TikTok in China, about people purportedly earning good money in the United States. There was one influencer who kept messaging me his pay stubs in California, showing he was making $4,000 or $5,000 a month and telling me how easy it was, El said. He got into contact with an agent who promised to help him get to the U.S. Watching Douyin videos, El learned how Zuxan, or walk the line, to the U.S.-Mexico border. First, he flew to Turkey, then to Ecuador. Then he took a grueling month-long trip from South America to Mexico that included buses, boats, and a long walk through the hazardous Darien Gap jungle. The journey was full of countless trials and tribulations, said Al. He was robbed twice in Latin America and feared he might die from exposure, but crossed into the U.S. in May of 2023. On his path, also regularly used by Caribbean and South American migrants. Now, large numbers of Chinese migrants are taking this land route. U.S. border authorities say they encountered 37,000 Chinese people who crossed illegally into the U.S. border through the U.S. southern border last year, more than the past 10 years combined. Border officials apprehended L, but released him in July, pending review of his asylum case. He rented a room in Southern California's Monterey Park, which is home to a large Chinese immigrant community. There, fellow Chinese immigrants introduced him to labor agencies that promised to place workers without documentation for a $100 fee. One Chinese-language social media ad for cutting grass in a greenhouse caught L's attention. It offered to pay $4,000 a month in cash for what seemed like easy work, he says. Borrowing a cell phone, he dialed the number listed. A supply chain for labor. From California, L and a handful of other Chinese migrants were driven to a New Mexico grow operation called Bliss Farms. They were shocked by what they saw, a hodgepodge of about 200 greenhouses. But because their phones and passports had been taken by their managers, they felt obligated to stay, workers said. The farm said it would cover food and shelter so you could save all your wages, a Bliss farm worker from China's northern province of Shenyang told NPR. But the farm was just a dirt field. He also requested anonymity because he was applying for asylum in the U.S. and fears being sent back to China. He says regularly they worked 15-hour shifts alongside the greenhouse's manager, who was also a man from China's Shandong province, and the manager's relatives. At the end of the shift, the managers left, and the workers slept in wooden sheds on dirt floors. 3 workers from NPR interviewed said none of them were paid before the operation was shuttered. New Mexico authorities say a tip about worker conditions and zoning violations led them to visit the farm last year. Just a disastrous grow. There was trash, water, fertilizers, nutrients, pesticides leaking into the ground, says Todd Stevens, director of the state's Cannabis Control Division. As soon as the officer stepped in, I think red flags started going off everywhere. Authorities raided Bliss Farms in August of 2023. Sanchez, director of the New Mexico social services nonprofit The Lifelink, describes the conditions of labor she encountered there. They had burns, visible burns on their hands and arms. The chemicals, they told me it was from the chemicals, Sanchez said. They looked very malnourished. Elle and other workers interviewed were among those found at the farm. They applied for asylum in the U.S. and their cases are pending. Trying to get on the money train. Weed has become big business in the United States, where about half of the states have legalized it for adult recreational use, and about 2/3 have legalized medical use. Despite federal law prohibiting marijuana, these states swapped out local penalties for new rules to regulate sales, create tax revenue, and stimulate economic growth. New Mexico is one of them. In 2021, it legalized recreational use of marijuana after it was already long legal for medical use, and permitted growers to raise a limited number of the plants. That set off a scramble to purchase residential land for cannabis grows. So many people were interested in trying to get onto the money train, so to speak, right from the start, says Don Groen, a planning and zoning director in New Mexico's Torrance County, who has investigated water and water usage complaints related to marijuana cultivation. Some really knew that they were doing it, and others, it was more of a dream than it was a reality. Investigations by nonprofit news outlet ProPublica have found links between Chinese diplomats, Chinese Communist Party organizations, local Chinese criminal syndicates, and some marijuana operations in the United States. In the operations reported in this story, NPR found no sign of Chinese state or Asian organized crime involvement. The business did attract small-scale individual investors from China who were eager to invest abroad. Ella Hao, an accountant from China's northern Shandong province, says she moved with her husband to Los Angeles in 2020 during the start of the pandemic, in part to secure new passports for their 2 U.S.-born children. In September of 2020, following the recommendation of 2 other Chinese-speaking immigrants, Hao and her husband decided to invest about $30,000 in a New Mexico marijuana farm near the town of Shiprock, according to handwritten receipts seen by NPR. We invested on the strength of the recommendation from someone we thought was a close friend, Hao said. Shiprock is on the Navajo reservation in New Mexico, and the farm had been started by Dene Benally, a former Navajo Nation Farm Board president who is currently dealing with numerous legal challenges after cultivating hemp on the native land. In 2022, Hao and her husband paid another $300,000 to buy a plot of land in neighboring Oklahoma in a joint purchase with another recent immigrant from China. She convinced them that setting up greenhouses to grow marijuana there would be even more lucrative than in New Mexico. Despite successfully applying for a grow license under her friend's name, the Oklahoma grow never started operations, papers show. Our land prices are really cheap. There really was no enforcement going on until we started looking at this, said Donnie Anderson, director of the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. So I think it really was just a perfect storm. Trouble at other grow operations. Just a few miles from Bliss Farms, authorities zeroed in on another unrelated marijuana grow in Shiprock, New Mexico, started by Navajo Nation entrepreneur Benally. In September of 2023, 15 Chinese workers brought a lawsuit alleging that Benally and his associates made the laborers work 14-hour shifts with no pay at the Shiprock operation, that managers physically abused the laborers to get them to work harder, and that the guards prevented the workers from leaving. After Benally obtained a license to start a new operation in Torrance County, the county commissioner Samuel Sharop visited the Shiprock site. I saw a shed with bunks built floor to ceiling like a submarine, stacked 18 inches apart, and a number of RVs with no hookups, no water or sewer hooked to them, and electric cords lying in the mud in the water, Sharop said. Some of the workers came from Chinese-speaking immigrant communities in New York. They were people who had worked in restaurants, nail salons, massage parlors, and other industries hit hard during COVID, says Aaron Hagula, a lawyer representing the 15 workers. New Mexico authorities revoked the farm's license and fined it $1 million for exceeding state growing limits and other violations. New Mexico authorities NPR's efforts to reach Benally were unsuccessful. This past April, Benally tried to dismiss the workers' lawsuit against him, arguing that federal law had no jurisdiction over his case. Reporting by the nonprofit investigative outlet Searchlight New Mexico, published in April, suggested he was still growing marijuana. Benally has partnered with a number of Chinese business people to get the Shiprock operation started, according to the work agreement seen by NPR. In early 2022, one of the partners, real estate agent Irving Ria Lin, was arrested in California during a month-long crackdown on illegal grows. And one of the operation's backers, a solar panel entrepreneur named Xiafeng Peng, or Denton Peng, is a fugitive who is wanted in China on fraud charges. He did not respond to NPR's request for comment. Another associate named Brian Pang, not related to Zhang Pang, started a grow operation in Oklahoma, which used some of the same Chinese workers from their Shiprock farm. In 2022, that grow was raided as well and shut down. That November, an investor named Chen Wu killed 4 workers on the farm, demanding $300,000 investment back. Wu is serving a life sentence in prison. The investor, Hao, says she lost a lot of money in the business she invested in. Her $30,000 was not returned when the Shiprock farm closed, she says. And the Oklahoma operation where she sank $300,000, her family's life savings, disappeared after Hao discovered her name had been omitted from all the land deeds and the business license. Because we do not speak English, we could not read any of the documents and licenses or dispute the facts in any legal case. We do not know where to turn, Hao said. My obvious suggestion would be a bilingual attorney. Those are not incredibly impossible to find. Too ashamed to return to China, Hao says she has been raising her 2 young children in California by finding short-term jobs. Her most reliable gig has been pruning marijuana plants at a licensed California grow operation. This NPR article, though not short in length, was written by Emily Fang, reporting from Taipei, Taiwan, KUMM's Alice Fordham, contributing from Torrance County, New Mexico, and NPR's Greta Pittinger, contributing research from Seattle. This is Yarrow Kubrin, High at 9 News. I'd like to hear what the rest of you think.
Did you just read an article from Cum News?
No, it was NPR. NPR. I mean, with your stilettos and the skirt and the bush, I knew you were going to go there again. But no, this is NPR. This is straight down the fairway, nonpartisan, established.
I don't know if NPR is. I don't know about it.
There's a hot take from Cum News.
This was a money shot, but not that way, ma'am.
I mean, man, these sounds terrible conditions, Yarrow. Like this sounds like even worse conditions than what you hear about from horror stories in Northern California.
It sounds similar, but
it is
we
absolutely
have to joke about those. But this is pretty heartbreaking.
I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing about like with the sores from chemicals and whatnot.
Oh, I've heard people. I mean, there were people in Colorado who were complaining because the trimmers and the growers, while they were doing harvest, were getting bit because there were so many bugs on the shitbag weed. So it's like, whatever. But this is egregious. Not feeding people, abusing people physically, like. That's criminal. That goes beyond labor standards. Like at this point, this is just. First of all, it's false imprisonment, right? I don't know. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm not here for it. And I hate that it's all associated with one ethnic group of people, because there are some operators of Asian descent that do an amazing job, that are really cool people. There's some places in California that have made some really, really egregious policies that are specifically to attack those groups of people. So I hate to see something like this that's going to make it harder on the ones that are doing well.
Well, I can say here in Missouri, I'm very close to Oklahoma, and this is not news to me. This is something that's talked about regularly here. People in Oklahoma that have license not only are in competition with these people, but they're actually worried because there have been people that have just taken that mentality and raided the other operations just because they knew that they were successful. So in Oklahoma, I know specifically that this is a thing that is happening, and people are talking about here in Missouri and trying to figure out what's going on and why it took so long. But as we know, Oklahoma was such a Wild West, where they came out and gave the license at such a low entry fee and easy access that there's so many licenses that it's really hard to track all of them down and see who's doing it the right way and the wrong way. And this is a real thing that's discussed here in the community in Missouri.
It's interesting to me because when we first started to cover this on the East Coast, and I think it was New Hampshire and Maine, there was a tendency for me to feel like this was some sort of, there was a racist twist to this, because it seemed very alleged. There wasn't a lot of facts, and it seemed very focused on, people of Asian descent. But as I've started to see more articles and a steady drumbeat, we all knew about the Hmong communities and some of the communities in California that have gotten involved in cultivation. But there was these salacious allegations about like the Chinese government and crime and Communist Party and all this stuff. But I'm starting to see more and more of these articles. I believe that this is a credible news source. I believe that this was, when they're using ProPublica, I mean, that is what colleges and institutions subscribe to for their students to learn information. Maybe you guys want to also argue that that's a partisan news source, but we could beat that up on another show tomorrow at 9 a.m.
I'm happy to do that.
But I think
some of the Hmong people in Siskiyou County are who I was referring to, actually, where they were writing, they weren't going to allow water to be delivered on roads where Hmong people lived. Like, you can't block people off from water and things like that. And I'm actually going up to Siskiyou to teach a pesticide application safety class and the OSHA required classes for the Hmong community. So, I mean, they're trying, at least. They're not trying to hurt people. They're trying to get the things down that will make these standards better. So, it sounds like this other group is not trying.
We've seen anti-Asian sentiment here in California since the 1800s. The Chinese communities were moving in then and were really just doing well because they're very family related and they're super hardworking. And what we started seeing was all types of anti-Chinese sentiment and laws back then. And then we go through into World War II, where Americans of German or Austrian descent who lived in California were totally ignored and left alone because of their white appearance, whereas the Japanese were rounded up and put into internment camps, which were basically concentration camps without the ovens. They lost property, they lost wealth. There's families still to this day that have never really rebounded economically from what was done to them, and reparations have just started to be made to those folks as well. And it's just so ridiculous, all of this immigration talk. When we really look at what happened, it's like, look, we stole this fair and square through like genocide at the tip of a sword, and now you can't come in unless you're legal. I think we really need to, again, this just points to more soul searching we need to do as a country and be like, look, whoever's here and however we got there, it was primarily through violence. Why should we begin restricting immigration? Why shouldn't we find a way to just let everybody in? There isn't a single thing here, unless you are a First Nations person, there's not a single thing here that you are actually morally entitled to. It was all stolen, and so why shouldn't we just share it with everyone? That being said, federal decriminalization, I think, would lead to less of these problems and would allow law enforcement to focus on these human trafficking, whether it's sexual or in the drug business, because I think that shit is disgusting, and needs to be addressed. I think federal decriminalization is the way to clear a path to find who is the worst actor in those cases. Well, that being said, let's share this country with everybody, since it was stolen in the first.
Right.
What's challenging for me in this article is a couple things. First of all, it says that when they got to Bliss Farms, their passports were taken. Well, if you come in through our southern border, you don't have a passport. So that's a natural conflict in the article. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, you could have a passport. I mean, I could sneak in somewhere and have my passport in my back pocket, though.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. I suppose you're right. Good point. Good point. Thank you for thinking faster and better than me. Just another day in the office here with St. Germain. The other thing that was interesting to me is if you buy a $300,000 piece of property in Oklahoma, you don't do that with cash. So if you have money that's in the banking system that you can wire into escrow, and it shows that it's coming from account A to escrow A, and your name is affiliated with that, I don't understand if you have over $250,000 liquid, why you can't find a bilingual attorney, a real estate attorney, to help you transact that and to keep your name on the deed. And so I talked earlier about like the social equity operator goes, oy vey, but didn't read their contract, and how I feel a little less compassionate for those that don't put in the work. If you have $300,000 and you're doing a real estate deal and you know you're not native to the country and you know you don't speak English and you know that the real estate laws might be a little bit different than where you came from, how do you not know that you could get somebody to protect your interests during the course of that transaction and to make sure that the language barrier isn't the reason why you get swindled?
I have a guess. It's because it wasn't his money. That money was provided by the CCP. That's my guess.
I mean, he knew enough to say
I'm just guessing he was just trusting his friend and naive.
Involved in his lawsuit. So hopefully this was filed on merits that are allowable in federal courts, because I have seen some very nicely and appropriately filed cannabis lawsuits where the court's thrown it out because of federal prohibition of cannabis. So hope to God he doesn't escape through on that. But it seems like, I agree with you, Jason.
Well, I mean, the woman that they quoted who did the $300,000 transfer was an accountant, right? Like, you can't be the dumbest person if you're an accountant. You clearly
She could be very well in on it too at the same time too, Yarrow.
Well, she'd have to be in on it.
She's 100% in on it in my mind.
Your accountant buries the bodies, and you have an accountant that's on your team to keep them from floating to the top.
So you're an accountant. You transferred $300,000 for a real estate transaction. You can't do that in cash. You don't put your name on the deed, and then you say that you were swindled. More likely you didn't put your name on the deed because you were using that license to divert, and you wanted it to be a criminal enterprise where you had no fingerprints on it.
That's what I'm trying to say. All funded by the CCP. All right. Nothing else to say,
That's a mic
guys?
drop.
Okay, fair enough. Well, on that, you guys, we are going to call it a day. Thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. Big thank you to our audience and supporters for tuning in daily and enjoying all of the insanity that is the developing cannabis industry. Thank you to all of our correspondents for being absolutely amazing today. And thank you to Cloud Media Partners. We got Millie over. There we go. Look at that. And thank you to us, all of our sponsors, Catalyst, and all of you others as well. And thank you all, you at home, for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It is America's #1 daily cannabis news show.